interviews. And Terry Stewart's been part of a number of our conversations about the WTO and writes about those issues frequently on his own blog, Current Thoughts on Trade. Rufus Yerxa, who is the president of the National Foreign Trade Council, and Wendy Cutler with the Asia Society Policy Institute. We wanted to just get you guys together to talk about the process and where we think things are with the DG selection process. Rufus, maybe if you could just kind of kick us off based on your experience as Deputy Director General, being in the room for some of these discussions in years past, how you think that went and what is happening. I don't think everyone understands how the confessional process even works and how we landed where we are today.
Yeah, thanks, Ken, and thanks for doing this. It's a great opportunity to keep the dialogue going among WITA and its audience. Obviously, we're now well into the real nitty-gritty of the selection process. As you said, already 3 candidates have been eliminated. We're down to 5. The process so far, one would have to say, observing it from a distance, that it's working as it was intended to do in the procedures that were set up in 2002. They have, as you say, this confessional system where the 3 officials of the WTO leadership, the chair of the General Council, the chair of the dispute settlement body, and the chair of the trade policy monitoring body all meet in confessionals with each individual delegation, and they come in. The interesting thing is in the first 2 rounds, those delegations tell them their 4 preference candidates in the first round, and then I think they're going to narrow it down to 3 preference candidates in the second round. I'm sorry.
Down to 2, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, just two on the round that started.
Yeah, I'm sorry, down to 2 in the second round. The 3 they won't accept. So what happens out of that confessional is that the troika, the 3 officials, come back to the General Council, and in the first round they named the 3 officials they thought were least likely to attract consensus, and that of course was Sayadi from Mexico, it was Hamid Mamdouh from Egypt, and it was the trade minister from Moldova. And so they were expected to drop out. And in fact, all 3 of the countries made very, appropriate concessional statements. Now we're down to the next round and the same thing will happen again. And I'm presuming that it will go smoothly, that they'll hear from the delegations. They're actually doing these, they're doing these in what I would call an in-person virtual environment, Ken, if you can believe that. They've got this set of rooms in the WTO, which are all right next to each other. But instead of being in the room together, each one of the troika is in a separate adjoining room, and then the delegations come into a 4th room, and they communicate virtually, like on a platform like this, but they're right next door to each other. It's kind of a funny way to do it, but apparently a lot of delegations insisted that it actually be in person, and this was how they made sure that they had social distancing. But I do think that now we'll get down to 2. You have to remember that once they get down to 2, that's where the rubber really meets the road, because so far no delegation has been in a position of being able to block any of this process. You can't block a determination by the troika that these candidates are less likely to get consensus, and then their governments agree to drop them. But when you're at the final stage and you go for the confessionals between the final 2, they come back and report who they believe is the one most likely to attract consensus. And at that point, there has to be a consensus decision by the General Council to appoint that person Director General. And that's where, if a country is going to block, that's where it would have to occur, or if a group of countries. So we see the process going smoothly now, but we'll have to see when we get to that final stage whether anybody.
So it sounds like if you got to the final stage and there was a serious objection that was blocking the troika didn't do its job, they presumably have a sense of who would be objectionable that would block them from getting appointed in the end.
I think the problem that you would think that would be the case, because presumably you know, the two finalists or the one that they select is on virtually everybody's list, but that's not guaranteed, Ken. There could be some countries which don't put them on their list,
Mhm.
or they put them on their list and later decide to block. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. So you can't be absolutely certain until you get to that magic moment.
Gotcha. Okay. So we hosted all these candidates on the WITA platform. I think I know Rufus and Wendy, you were on all those, and I think Terry, you were probably watching all those, and I know you've followed all this extremely closely and have written a lot about it. Any quick thoughts on the folks who didn't make it through? Mr. Siade from Mexico, Mamdouh from Egypt, and Ulanovsky from Moldova.
Well, I was the most surprised that Siade didn't make the next cut. I mean, he seemed pretty strong. He had a lot of experience both in the capital and in Geneva. And frankly, he demonstrated a real self-confidence when we spoke to him as well. I mean, when I look at who made it and who didn't make it, the few observations I would make is that women are looking good. And I think we're going to have a female, one way or the other, we're going to have a female director general. So I think gender played a role. I also think probably geography, and maybe Siade, even though Mexico is technically part of North America and not part of Latin America, I'm sure, some member countries felt that they needed to look at another continent. And then the only other observation I would make is that just based on our interviews, Siade and Mamdouh from Egypt, they just seemed to be like the insider's insider. They knew the WTO and the GATT inside out. During our interviews, they were talking about previous negotiations and previous folks that they work with. And I think maybe, some countries are turned off by that now, meaning that they really want something different and a different type of experience.
And neither one had been a minister, Wendy. Neither one had been a minister either. That's another aspect.
There was our good friend Bill Reinsch had a very Machiavellian thought that maybe Mr. Siade was knocked out because he was a strong candidate, and that there might be some thought that by culling the field sort of one of the stronger candidates, that it let some of the other stronger ones emerge. It might be a weird way of saying it, but that the Americas wouldn't be split, and it would then force other countries to back a candidate from another region. Terry, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I agree with a lot of what Wendy has gone through in terms of strengths. If you take a look at the people who were knocked out, with the exception of the Moldovan, they clearly would be what you would call the top technical people. And they had the longevity, as Wendy went through. And if you think about trying to find a resolution for things like dispute settlement, having somebody who was there at the creation of the WTO might not be a bad source to try to move countries in the direction of restoring what was actually agreed to. So the fact that neither Dr. Siade nor Mr. Mamdouh made it past the first round tells you that technical expertise was not where they were looking. The other six had all been ministers, and some are still ministers. And in fact, a number of them had been ministers on multiple occasions, either the same position, such as Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, or different positions, such as Ambassador Mohammed. And so obviously the political side played it out. We have the unusual situation that the press has generated a certain amount of scuttlebutt as to what happened in the first round vis-a-vis the Europeans. The Europeans clearly went first for gender and second for geographic diversity. And I know from things that I have seen from Dr. Siade that he was basically blocked by the Europeans on the basis of gender and geography. The Europeans voted for the three women, or picked the three women, but didn't pick either of the two men.
Okay.
that made it into the final, which in my view means that they probably threw their support behind Mondu, who didn't get support elsewhere. So as you go into the second round, the post I put up today basically says that you have the chance between the members from Africa and the EU, despite some splintering of at least one country from Eastern Europe and possibly more, that you could lock in the two African candidates into the final pretty easily if they vote in a block. And Europe voted in a block the first round. They're having some problems in the second round. And the issue with Africa is whether or not they will coalesce behind their two candidates, or whether the divisions east and west in Africa will lead them to only support one, and hence you end up with someone else as one of the finalists.
And let me ask you, just because I don't remember the answer to this, do the Europeans vote as a bloc in this, or do they have an individual voice?
They vote individually, but the indication both out of the commission and in the media has been that they agreed to vote in a uniform manner in round one, and they've been a little upset that Hungary has already broken loose. Rufus and I, we were talking earlier, he indicated that it's possible that they could lose some other ones in the east. But I think that you'll see the vast majority of the EU going for two of the women. And my guess is, since they viewed geographical diversification and gender as key, that I wouldn't be surprised if they picked the two African candidates for round two, those who vote as a group.
Let me ask you guys. We also have our friend from Korea. Certainly brings some geographic diversity to the candidate pool that's there. And Mr. Tuwajiri from Saudi Arabia. Personally, I think they're all talented. All 8 of them were very talented. I didn't know. I was surprised that he made it through and Mr. Siade didn't, which is why I think Bill Reinsch's theory was an interesting one out there. What other tea leaves are you picking up? I think we talked about that the technocrats may have gotten kicked out. The political leadership might be important. Did we pick up anything on substance? They answered a lot of questions on our sessions. Did we pick up anything there?
Can I just jump in? I think that, obviously, it's always tough to predict. I'm tempted to quote that great baseball sage Yogi Berra about, I never make predictions, especially about the future. But I do think that Wendy's put her finger on one big factor here. This just could be the year of the woman. Certainly that is, the force of history is moving in that direction, and particularly where you have 3 women who touch so many of the bases of what it would be important in a director general: a good technical experience, negotiating experience, ministerial level experience. I guess I'd put it this way. I can easily envision, and in fact, it may be probable, that we have a final with 2 women. I can't even imagine having a final with 2 men. I think clearly the ones who will struggle the hardest to get broad geographic diversity, geographic representation, and also just a feeling of kind of people being excited are the 2 men in the race. The Saudi having very little connection to the WTO system historically, and Liam Fox. Let's face it, he might pick off some of the more kind of right-wing Eastern European governments, but he's unlikely to break into the bulk of the 27 EU members. The Africans are not going to put him on their list, I don't think, or not many of them. And I don't see why. You got to remember, it's a large block of votes in Latin America now that are looking for a home to go to. They obviously, not enough of them were excited about Saudi to push him into the next round, but where do all those Latin countries go? Because it's a large number of countries. I think for the Korean, it's a question of how much can she galvanize, deep and broad support from Asia. I don't think Korea has kind of the foreign policy chops and muscle that ironically, that even the two African countries have. So this is going to be interesting. But if if I wanted to violate Yogi Berra's admonition, I would say that I think right now it's looking most likely that Amina and Ngozi would be the two finalists.
Wendy, what do you think? I mean, we haven't talked that much about Minister Myunghee of Korea. What do you think of her candidacy? And Terry, I want to come back to you after that and talk about some of the substantive things that we heard from some of them.
Well, first, I just want to underscore that even, gender is an important issue here, but all three of these women are highly qualified
exactly.
and were so impressive, not only in our WITA events, but in other webinars and other public events they've done. So it makes me really proud. I think Minister Yu, who I confess that I've known for many years and met her when she was younger working on chorus, she's extremely impressive. And to be a woman and make it in that society, in that role, I mean, kudos to her for doing that. And I think she kind of, in some ways, was a surprise candidate, because a lot of people in the beginning were asking me, who is she? Why is she running? I'm going to go further than Rufus is very conservative here, saying it's most likely it's going to be a woman. It's going to be a woman. They're all really strong. The question is who it will be. And frankly, I wouldn't want to be David Walker now and the other two, because which women, of those three, which two then make the next round? And if it's the two African women, that's going to be a very difficult decision, I think, for certain WTO members. I would also add each African woman, Ngozi and Amina, they have some similarities being, they're both very impressive, but clearly Amina's more of an insider. She knows trade. She chaired a ministerial. She told us all about that during the WITA event and, actually brought agreements together at that ministerial she chaired in Kenya. And Ngozi is more of an outsider, and she was very upfront about, I think her term was, we're going to take a fresh look at these issues. She seemed to have a lot of stature and a lot of charm. But when you look at their positions on actual issues, they're both really skillful, because when you look through your notes and you try and figure out how they came out on all of these issues, it was hard to distinguish major differences in their positions. They're trying to appeal to everyone now.
Terry, any thoughts on this? What are some of what you heard? You're somebody who's commentated on a lot of the WTO issues over the last few years, and curious what your thoughts are on how they might address some of the things that have been raised.
Yeah, well, I think with Dr. Siadi being out of the picture, that the big group of votes that are out there, if you will, are from the Americas. I think that the three women candidates are all very strong. And if the members decided that they wanted amongst those three to go with people who have more of a trade record, then obviously you would go with Minister Yu and with Ambassador Mohammed. If you decide that geographical diversity, since there has been an Asian who has been Director General in the past, and hence you wanted to reward or distribute it to Africa at this point, and or if what you thought was you wanted somebody who has maximum amount of potential political leverage and fresh ideas, then I think you've got the two African women who would go in. I have very little doubt that both of the African candidates will pick up a fair number of preferences out of the Americas. I would think they would pick some up out of Asia. I think the challenge for Minister Yu is going to be whether she gets shut out of Africa and whether she gets shut out of Europe. And I think if that were to be the case, going to Rufus's earlier comment, no matter how good a candidate she is, no matter how much support she may have out of Asia, she would fail the test of broad geographical support.
And she has a potential, let's be honest, a potential Japan problem as well. I mean, relations between Korea and Japan are not in great shape now. And it's possible that Japan, may start kind of laying the groundwork to let people know that they'd be really uncomfortable if the decision were going in that direction.
I mean,
Well, yeah, just
think-
following, sorry, just one quick question there, just mentioning kind of things that have come up or potential obstacles. Wendy, I remember one of the issues a couple weeks, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, there was something in the news about Dr. Ngozi and that she had dual citizenship and it wasn't in some of her paperwork or wasn't in something somebody saw and they thought that might be an issue with potentially with the Chinese. That was speculated from Asian press, but have we heard anything that there's anything there?
I mean, it's been kind of radio silence. There was an article in the South China Morning Post shortly after Bloomberg broke that story with, I believe, some Chinese scholars being quoted that this might be a problem. But we haven't heard really peep from China on this election process since it started.
Seems like that was speculation as much as something they heard.
Correct. But, you know, if you think it through and if you think if the tables were turned, you know, we might have a problem if, let's just say, one of the candidates had a European or Chinese passport.
Yeah, I think
Didn't mention it.
the challenge, Ken, is that the bios don't require that you identify whether you're a dual national or not. Everybody else who was a dual national had that in her bio. She didn't have anything about her nationality in the bio. So it wasn't that she was necessarily hiding it just because it wasn't a requirement. I think you probably see the next time that they probably include a line that should be in the bio.
Right. So we've
I
really
think it's worth just stating what the others have said about, you know, this really is a very difficult decision because you've got all three of the women candidates clearly touched so many of the bases and they were all very compelling and very strong. And, you know, I think this comes down to, you know, how much regional support they have within their own region. The problem for the two Africans, of course, is that in this next round, they may split the African votes. And then that does provide an opportunity for Minister Yu because she can get strong support, say, from Latin America. And, you know, yes, the Europeans may vote as a bloc, although things may start to break down a little bit there in this next round. We'll see. The last thing I'd say is that, you know, obviously, whichever one of the three women doesn't get selected, you know, that's going to be interesting to see if it prompts countries to, you know, start to say that they're not satisfied with the remaining candidates and would consider blocking.
So that is a possibility, even though there's sort of consensus building, people could say, you know what, I'm not happy with the way this is landing. We need to go back to the drawing board. That is possible?
I think it's possible. I think it's still not the most likely outcome because I think everybody's afraid of that outcome. But we are living in an environment where, you know, you can see how kind of erratic governments have been on trade issues. And take our own government as a shining example. And, you know, they might just decide to block. I haven't heard anything, by the way, of you know, exactly who the U.S. government has on their, you know, their final preference list or you know, any statements that would suggest that they would pose any of these candidates. So I don't know what a Trump administration would do.
Wendy?
Yeah, and just say early on, there was that Lighthizer comment, almost a flip comment about Liam Fox. But since then, it's been radio silence as well from the Winder building.
Yeah.
So we said we were going to keep this to about 20 minutes. I think we've actually gone a little longer than that. Maybe just do a quick thing, just who each of you think will be the final two. I think we've kind of hinted at it, but if you're willing, Terry, who do you think?
Yeah, I would say the two Africans will be in the final two. And absent something coming up on the dual citizenship, I think Dr. Ngozi will be the new Director General.
All right. Well, Terry's willing to take a stand. Rufus?
I think it's, you know, I hate to give you an either or. It's either going to be the two Africans or it's going to be one of the Africans and the Korean.
Okay. Wendy?
It's going to be two women.
All right. Well, that'll wrap it this session. I want to bring you guys back when we get to the final two, and let's see if we can have another conversation and see if we can read the tea leaves then and see where we're at. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate your time. We look forward, everyone, take care, be safe, be well, wear a mask. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.